RICO. And racketeering is important because you can get to racketeering in many ways that don't necessarily involve sex trafficking. You can get to racketeering.
Be on the jury because it's a high-profile case, or because it involves a celebrity, or perhaps for other personal reasons.
Great time, stay in the light. It's all good. Get your rest. You are the crack pipe.
The Diddy Files. Inside America's most shocking celebrity trial. Your best live YouTube documentary on Diddy's trial. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. We're nearing the end of our journey through one of the most shocking celebrity trials in American history. But before we close this chapter, I want you to think about something. What does justice look like in a case like this? Is it a guilty verdict that sends a billionaire to prison for the rest of his life? Is it an acquittal that allows him to rebuild his empire? Or is it something more complex? A reckoning with the systems of power that allow these alleged crimes to happen in the first place. Let's start with what's immediately at stake. If Sean Diddy Combs is convicted on all charges, he faces a minimum of 15 years in federal prison. But the maximum sentence is life behind bars. Life. That means he could die in prison, never again experiencing the freedom that his billion-dollar empire once bought him. But it's not just about prison time. As we discussed earlier, his $35 million Star Island mansion could be seized by the government under federal forfeiture laws. His other properties, his businesses, his entire financial empire could be dismantled piece by piece. Think about that transformation. From a billionaire music mogul to a federal prisoner with nothing but a prison uniform and a cell. It's a fall from grace that would be unprecedented in the entertainment industry. But what if he's acquitted? What if his $15 million dream team succeeds in creating reasonable doubt? What if the jury decides that the government hasn't proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt? An acquittal wouldn't just mean freedom for Diddy. It would send a message about accountability in America. It would suggest that wealth and power can still shield you from consequences, even when faced with detailed testimony from alleged victims and extensive physical evidence. And what would that mean for Jane, the woman who found the courage to testify against one of the most powerful men in entertainment? What would it mean for other potential victims who might be watching this case, wondering if it's worth speaking out against their own abusers? But here's what I think is most important about this case. It's not really about Sean Combs. It's about the systems that enabled the alleged behavior. It's about an industry that has long protected powerful men while silencing their victims. It's about a culture that equates wealth with worth and power with permission. Episode 8, The Celebrity Web. What if I told you that some of the most famous names in sports history were being used as code words during alleged sexual crimes? What if I told you that Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and Shaquille O'Neal, three of basketball's greatest legends, had their names turned into something dark and twisted? Welcome back to the Diddy Files. I'm your host, and what you're about to hear in this episode will show you just how deep the alleged conspiracy goes. Because as prosecutors near the end of their case against Sean Diddy Combs, new testimony has revealed a web of celebrity connections that's more disturbing than anyone imagined. Picture this scene. You're in a luxury hotel room. The lights are set to red. There are 3 people present, and they're about to engage in what prosecutors call forced sexual encounters. But here's the twist. They're not using their real names. Instead, they're role-playing as some of the most beloved athletes in American history. According to Jane's testimony, and remember, this is the same Jane whose story we've been following throughout this trial. She, Diddy, and a male escort named Paul used a nickname system during their alleged hotel nights. And the names they chose should make your stomach turn. Jane testified that she was called Kobe, after Kobe Bryant, the Lakers legend who tragically died in a helicopter crash. Diddy took the name Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. And the male escort Paul, he was Shaquille O'Neal, the dominant center who won multiple championships. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. These aren't just random nicknames. These are the names of athletes who inspired millions of people around the world. Kobe Bryant, who dedicated his life to excellence and mentoring young people. Michael Jordan, whose competitive spirit became legendary. Shaquille O'Neal, known for his larger-than-life personality and charitable work. And according to Jane's testimony, their names were being used during alleged sexual crimes. But it gets worse. Jane also testified that they used another nickname, Trifecta. When asked why, her answer was chilling in its simplicity. Because it's 3. Think about that. Trifecta, a term usually associated with winning, with success, with hitting the jackpot. But in this context, according to the allegations, it represented something entirely different. It represented what prosecutors say was a systematic pattern of sexual coercion and abuse. Now, I need to be absolutely clear about something. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and Shaquille O'Neal are not accused of any wrongdoing. They had nothing to do with these alleged crimes. Their names were simply being used, according to testimony, as part of what appears to be a twisted role-playing system. But that almost makes it worse, doesn't it? The idea that the names of beloved sports heroes were being corrupted and used in this way? It's a level of psychological manipulation that goes beyond just the physical acts described in this trial. And here's what I find most disturbing about this revelation. It shows just how organized and systematic these alleged crimes were. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't random. According to Jane's testimony, there was a whole system in place. Nicknames, roles, a structure that turned alleged sexual abuse into some kind of sick game. But the celebrity connections don't stop with sports legends. As prosecutors have presented their case, a parade of famous names has emerged. Not as participants in crimes, but as witnesses to behavior, as connections in Diddy's network, as people who were present when things allegedly happened. Think about the scope of what we're talking about here. We're not just dealing with one man's alleged crimes. We're dealing with a network that touched some of the biggest names in entertainment and sports. A network where, according to testimony, celebrities witnessed violence, where famous names were used as code words, where the culture of celebrity itself may have enabled and protected alleged criminal behavior. And that raises uncomfortable questions, doesn't it? How many people knew what was allegedly happening? How many people saw signs but stayed quiet? How many people were so blinded by fame and wealth that they ignored what was right in front of them? Jane's testimony about these nicknames came during the 5th week of the trial, as prosecutors were nearing the end of their witness list. But rather than wrapping things up neatly, these revelations have opened up new questions about the scope and scale of what allegedly happened. Because if Diddy was using the names of sports legends during alleged crimes, what does that tell us about his mindset? What does it tell us about how he viewed these encounters? Was it about power? Was it about control? Was it about turning something that should be consensual and intimate into a performance, a game, a conquest? And here's another question I want you to consider. What does this say about our celebrity culture? We live in a society where we worship famous people, where we put athletes and entertainers on pedestals, where we assume that wealth and fame equal virtue and character. But this case is showing us something different. It's showing us that celebrity culture can also be a shield for predators. It can be a way to silence victims. It can be a system that protects the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. As we continue to follow this trial, as we hear more testimony and see more evidence, I want you to keep these celebrity connections in mind. Because they're not just interesting details or gossip. They're clues to understanding how alleged crimes like these can happen and continue for years without consequences. In our next episode, we're going to explore one of the most shocking revelations from Jane's testimony. Her trip to Las Vegas, where she allegedly attended another famous rapper's freak off. And what happened there will show you that the alleged behavior we've been discussing might not be limited to just one person. Because if there's one thing this trial is teaching us, it's that the entertainment industry's problems with power and abuse might be much bigger than any of us realized. And the celebrity names being dropped in this courtroom, they're just the beginning of a story that could reshape how we think about fame, power, and accountability in America. Are you ready to go deeper into this web of celebrity connections? Because what you're about to hear next will challenge everything you thought you knew about the entertainment industry. Former federal prosecutor Niyama Ramani points out that this case comes down to coercion versus consent. But I would argue that it's about something even bigger than that. It's about whether we, as a society, are willing to hold powerful people accountable for their actions. Think about the broader implications of this case. If the allegations are true, they suggest that for years, possibly decades, a system of abuse was operating in plain sight. People knew, people saw, people participated. And yet, it continued. How many other powerful figures in entertainment, politics, business, and other industries have similar systems in place? How many victims are still suffering in silence because they don't believe they'll be heard or believed? The Taughter Me Too movement showed us that sexual abuse and harassment are far more widespread than most people realized. But this case takes it a step further. It's not just about individual acts of abuse. It's about organized, systematic exploitation backed by unlimited resources. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. What happens next? Regardless of the verdict in this case, what changes? If Diddy is convicted, it might send a message that no one is above the law, regardless of their wealth or status. It might encourage other victims to come forward. It might force the entertainment industry to take a hard look at its own practices and power structures. But if he's acquitted, it might have the opposite effect. It might discourage victims from speaking out. It might reinforce the idea that wealth and power are the ultimate protection against accountability. Here's what I know for certain. This case has already changed things. Jane's testimony, regardless of the verdict, has put a spotlight on the dynamics of abuse and control in ways that are impossible to ignore. The evidence presented in this trial has shown us what systematic exploitation can look like when it's backed by unlimited resources. And the legal strategies we've seen, the $15 million defense, the jury selection issues, the fights over transparency versus victim protection, have shown us both the strengths and weaknesses of our justice system when it comes to high-profile cases. But perhaps most importantly, this case has shown us the courage it takes for victims to speak out against powerful abusers. Jane didn't have to testify. She could have stayed silent, taken whatever money was offered, and tried to move on with her life. But she chose to speak her truth, knowing that it would subject her to scrutiny, harassment, and attempts to destroy her credibility. That courage, the courage to speak truth to power, even when that power has unlimited resources to fight back. That's what this case is really about. As this trial moves toward its conclusion, as the jury prepares to deliberate, as we all wait to see what verdict they'll reach, I want you to remember something. Justice isn't just about what happens in a courtroom. It's about what we do with the knowledge we've gained. It's about whether we choose to believe victims when they speak out. It's about whether we hold powerful people accountable for their actions. It's about whether we work to change the systems that enable abuse and exploitation. The Diddy trial will end with a verdict, but the reckoning it represents, the broader conversation about power, abuse, and accountability in America, that's just beginning. And that reckoning will be determined not by 12 jurors in a Manhattan courtroom, but by all of us. By how we respond to what we've learned. By whether we choose to look the other way or demand better from the people and institutions we support. The question isn't just whether Sean Combs is guilty or innocent. The question is, what kind of society do we want to be? One that protects the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable? Or one that stands up for justice, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges everything we thought we knew? That's the real verdict we're all waiting for. And unlike the jury's decision, that verdict is up to each and every one of us. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most complex and disturbing celebrity trials of our time. If this documentary has affected you, if you're a survivor of abuse, or if you need support, please know that help is available. The National Sexual Assault Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-656-HOPE. You are not alone, and your voice matters. This documentary is based on public court records, testimony, and expert analysis. All individuals mentioned are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. If you found this content valuable, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. The conversation about power, abuse, and accountability doesn't end here. It's up to all of us to keep it going. Until the next episode, stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop asking the hard questions. At Black Rumors TV, we are family.